Hi everyone, today we're going to create some modern gouache florals, and you could use these for anything from cards and calendars to stickers or even just some images to share online. The whole goal of this lesson is to help you stop drawing basic florals. I see a lot of the same flowers over and over, and there are so many beautiful flowers out there waiting for you to draw them and waiting to be incorporated into interesting compositions so they don't look like everyone else's florals. So let's dive right into the project. I'm Liz Kohler-Brown, a surface designer and hand letterer who loves helping people find their style and sell their work. That is why we're focusing on this super sellable style today, these messy modern florals that you see all over but are a little bit difficult to reproduce unless you have a few easy techniques that we're going to cover today. We're going to be using a few of the brushes from my gouache class. So if you want to pick up that whole gouache set, if you really love these brushes and you want to get more like them, you can check out my gouache class. But for today, we're just going to play with a couple of them so you can get used to how they work. This video is part of my iPad art break series where I share quick and easy projects that you can do in a few minutes on your iPad. So make sure to hit subscribe if you want to get those in your notifications. So I'm going to start out here on my wildflower inspiration board, and I think this is the first place you need to go in order to not make basic flowers, and that is to start with some unusual, interesting shapes. So what I recommend here is you either go through this main page or go into the arrangements page and just screenshot all the most unusual, interesting flowers that you see. And we'll screenshot those, save them in the camera roll, and pull those up as we create some interesting florals in Procreate. Just in case you've never done a screenshot on your iPad before, you can just tap on the image and then tap the home button and the volume up button at the same time, and that takes a screenshot. So once you get all of those images onto your camera roll, it's time to start drawing. So I've got a 3000 by 3000 pixel canvas, and I'm just going to pull up my inspiration by dragging that Photos app over here and just start with one of the shapes that you like. I tried to get a few that were circular, some that were more long and tall, some berries, some that grow along big stems. So I'm looking for that variety, and I want to build that into my composition. So that's one of the first steps to not drawing basic flowers, and that is to start with interesting shapes. I'm going to be using my Everything Bagel brush set, which you can get for free right below this video, and I'm starting out with the sketching pencil. And let's just do a really simple vase. I'm just going to do a circular vase, keeping it really loose at this point. And I don't want my bouquet to be perfect. Like, I wouldn't want it to fit into a perfect triangle shape like that. I'm going to do something a little more unusual. Maybe it goes up a little higher on one side, a little lower on another. So then you can tap the move tool and make sure this whole composition is centered right where you want it to be on the canvas. Maybe a little bigger or smaller, but I do like to leave a lot of border on the outside. New color, new layer, and now we can start mapping out where our flower shapes are going to go. So let's say we're going to have one flower drawn from the side here. So that's going to be an oval shape. Then let's do that same kind of flower down here from the front. Every step we're thinking about variation. And then here, maybe it's like from the complete side. So right from the total side. And I'm sort of drawing the stems in as I go, just to sort of think about where these are going to live. New color, new layer, new flower shape. So I'm making sure these are super spaced out, that they've got their own personality, and that they're overlapping a little bit with the others. So these were kind of, let's call these medium. These are going to be the large size flowers that I do. So again, thinking about variation on every step of this process. That includes just the size of the flowers. And let's also do one of these from the side kind of compacted a little bit, like it hasn't fully opened up. So every single thing I'm putting down is keeping in mind all the things I've done previously, which is why it's harder to draw non-basic flowers, because there's a lot to think of. With every layer you create, you're adding more things to think about, like, oh, I've already done a flower that shape. I've already done one that fits into that particular shape. So now I need to change it up. Like maybe for this one, I just do a bud. So really focusing on variation, and that's not always easy to do. So I'm going to repeat the same process with a few different flowers, trying to overlap some of these so we get some really interesting overlapping. So this is going to be my overall shape, and I've intentionally overlapped a lot of these so you're not going to see a lot of background space. And then the last step is going to be some leaves. So out of everything you screenshotted, find your favorite leaves, your favorite leaf shape, hopefully kind of an interesting leaf shape compared to the ones that you usually draw. So this is all about like getting outside of your normal routine. If you're always drawing the same shapes all the time, it gets a little boring, right? And so the goal here is to do something different, challenge yourself to go outside of your normal way of doing things. So see if you can do that with these leaves. So this is what I'm left with. Obviously it looks like a little bit of a mess now, but it's a map for me to create a messy floral, and that's why I'm starting out messy. I don't want to start out super organized because then we just get down this path of creating boring flowers. So start out messy, let it be really loose and messy right now at this stage, and we'll play with kind of refining shapes as we go. But for now, we've just got a really fun loose composition. Let's make the vase bottom here. Of course, you can do any vase shape you want. It doesn't have to be this shape, but at this point we should have a pretty good idea of how your whole floral arrangement's going to be mapped out. So we could just merge all of those layers or just group them all to stay organized, and then create a new layer. So this new layer is going to be a more refined sketch. So I'm going to go to various flowers in my screenshots and just play around with getting close to what I see here. I'm not going to copy any of these exactly. I'm just kind of getting close. So for example, with this one, we've got these petals that are like sticking up like this. And one trick for anyone out there who's like, I just can't do messy florals, all my stuff looks really tight and boring, try just not picking up your pencil. So see how I'm drawing this whole thing without picking up my pencil, and maybe hold your pencil in a different way than you normally do. Like hold it really loose, just let it rest in your hand rather than trying to be super controlled all the time. That's usually the problem that people have, is that they are having trouble letting go of control. Anybody out there having trouble letting go of control? So this is a good opportunity to just practice that. So the more loose you can get with this, the better. And I'm going to take just a few minutes to do that. And I'm not even really picking up my pencil, just sort of glancing over here every now and then, and sometimes just sort of scribbling some shapes if I don't know what to do. That's good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect for now. We're just getting shapes on the page. So take your time with that, and we'll pick back up together when you've done that process with each and every flower here. One other trick here is if you start your flower in the corner of the circle rather than right in the middle of the circle, it automatically makes it look like you're showing it from the side. So it's really important where in that circle you choose to do that first petal. Over here, it's going to be more from the side. Over here, it's going to be from the front. So just like we were talking about that variation, I'm thinking about that as I go through this process. I'm like, where am I going to put that next flower so that it doesn't look like any of the previous ones I've done before? Where am I going to start that center part of the flower? So now that I've filled out all of those flowers, I'm doing the same process with my leaves, just refining those a little bit and using that same trick of not picking up my pencil to get some more interesting shapes that aren't so boring. You know, if you're struggling with doing the same boring shapes over and over, this is a really good trick. It forces you to be loose and fun, and it's kind of just an enjoyable way to draw too, because you don't have to worry so much about things being perfect. And if you want to get even more loose, you can go to that writing pencil. This writing pencil has no control on it. It's just really loose, whereas a sketching pencil will smooth things out for you a little bit. So if you're really struggling with loosening up, go for that writing pencil and just let your hand wobble around and move and create this beautiful loose composition. So I feel pretty good about this overall composition. So I'm going to make my rough sketch invisible and just bring my vase up into the composition. So now we have something that we can ink. So again, I'm going to group all of these sketches, and then I like to just duplicate that group and merge all of these sketches together. So then I just have one layer that is my sketch, and then that previous layer, I'm keeping all those pieces separate in case I ever want to go back to that, or sometimes I like to share images of the different stages of the process. So that's why I like to just leave it at, you know, some things are in separate layers, and then I have one that's all on one layer. I'm going with kind of a fall palette here, but of course you can go with whatever style works for you. I'm just going to start grabbing color, and I'm using this dark gouache glaze brush. This is also in the Everything Bagel brush set, which you can get free right below this video. And then I'm keeping it loose, going around the edge of this. And what you'll notice about this brush is that it does have a gouache edge to it. So you're not getting a smooth, crisp edge when you use this. And if you want to get even brush strokes in there, just don't press as hard and you'll get some nice little brush strokes. So just take your time there and focus on your brush strokes. But you can see how we get that loose squashy edge and we get some pretty brush strokes, and we'll go over these in various layers adding more detail, but for now we just need to get some color down. So I'm just going to go through and repeat the same process with every flower, making kind of like a fall palette. And as always, every new color goes on its own layer because we want to retain that ability to use a new color each, or to adjust colors as we work, right? We don't want to get ourselves into a situation where we can't change colors. So new color, new layer, that's the mantra. Finish it up. Now at this point we have all of the main shapes filled in, but there's definitely some blank spots that could be addressed and could just make this feel a little more full. So I'm going to create a new layer above everything else, and that's going to be a leaf layer. And these leaves can kind of start covering up some of the flowers I've already done, but just to create that feeling of looseness and layering. So just got some leaves coming peeking through here from the various flowers that are behind, and that's just creating this nice loose feeling. So you might want to do that as well. Have like one leaf layer behind, one leaf layer above, so that we can get a lot of variation in here. So I'm pretty happy with the overall look of this, but obviously our flowers could use a little bit more detail. So I'm going to bring that sketch layer above everything else so I can just barely see it. And now I'll start doing my detail on a new layer. I like to keep things on separate layers, like details on one layer, ink for the original base shapes on another layer. That just helps me stay organized. So we have a couple different options here with decorating these. So I'm going to sample the color of this orange flower and get a slightly darker shade, just pulling down on the color wheel. And I think we could go a little bit darker. You can go as extreme as you want here. I think, you know, dark works really well, but you also can do just really subtle. And you can make these as loose and playful or as tight as you want, but if you're going for that gouache look, very loose can be nice. So I'm just doing some loose squiggles. And then of course, when we zoom out, we could play around with the hue, saturation, and brightness. So what if we went more saturated, more bright, so it's more of just a subtle. You could even play around with going wild and doing different colors if you want to, but I'm going to stick with that right there. So that's going to be the color for my orange flowers, and I'll repeat that process on all the orange flowers. Another option would be this dark gouache glaze brightness shifter brush that I created. What this does is it changes color based on how hard you press. So it's a little easier to see how this works if you choose a lighter color. We've got light pink here and dark pink. So you can play around with using one of these shifter brushes in order to get a little bit more variation on your flowers if you want to, or just stick with doing a single color detail on each little area where the flower is separated. So I will repeat this process with the dark gouache glaze brush, and then we'll meet back when all of the flowers are decorated. I do think one of the secrets to making looser florals is to do things a little bit faster. So if you're used to really slowly moving around the page, give it a try to just, really fast. Jump in there and make some shapes, and your viewers can really feel that movement. I also want to point out these are just a couple of the gouache brushes that I have. I have a whole set of gouache brushes. So if you want to try out a lot more gouache effects, you can check out that class. So once you feel good about all of the decorative parts, of course, it's time to make that sketch invisible. Sometimes when you take that sketch away, it's like, oh, things don't look as good as I thought because I was using the contrast of that sketch as part of my composition. So at this point, you may want to go to some of those detail layers and do hue, saturation, brightness, and just kind of play around with those, like, okay, I want this to be a little darker, I want this to be a little lighter. Just kind of, decide what's going to pop, what's going to be interesting for your viewer to see. I like to, try some different things. Like maybe over here, I've done a darker accent. And so on the other ones, maybe I'll do a lighter accent. So just kind of playing around with how you decorate these. And then the last thing to do would be if you want to add a little more variation to each petal. So these petals are orange, so I'm going to get a slightly lighter orange, just really not hardly at all different from the original color. So just a hair, just so we can get a little bit of visual interest here. So I'm just going up like a hair at a time because I don't want to go too extreme. I just want it to be sort of an interesting difference, not a super bold difference. So that's perfect for me right there. I just want it to look like I was painting and I dipped my brush in a color that was just slightly different than the original. And then I just go in and use that as a highlight in various spots. It doesn't have to be super professional, like, well, because light is hitting it from a 90-degree angle, you have to do it from this angle. Like, just put some paint down, you guys. It doesn't matter. There can be light coming from all kinds of different directions in a room. So don't worry so much about, a lot of beginners say like, well, I don't know how to make light be in the right spot, so I just won't do it. But you start by just playing with it and seeing what happens when you put a little bit here, a little bit there. That is how you learn. So dive in and give it a try. Just like those previous layers where I was putting new color on a new layer, I'm doing the same thing with this highlight layer, because I may just want to really subtly adjust this, like, oh, that's a hair too dark, that's a hair too light. So even a shade like this, even though it's technically the same color and it's just a different shade of the base color, I do put that on its own layer. So in the end, I have a lot of layers. Yeah, it's true. But I pretty much always am happy that I kept everything on different layers so that I could go adjust it later. So I do recommend that. I also want to point out here that the level of detail that you do with this will depend a lot on what scale it will be in the end. So if this is going to be a tiny little blip on a shelf in a big composition that you're doing, obviously you don't want to have this much detail in it. So this would be good for a shelf that had maybe like 3 or 4 things on it, instead of being, you know, this size on a calendar, because then it's gonna confuse the viewer. It's like, what's all that detail? I can't see. It ends up just looking muddy. So that's where we need to adjust the detail based on what your final composition is going to be. Last step, well, last couple steps. One is going to be a background and one is going to be color version. So I'll go ahead and guess what the background might be. Maybe it's going to be this peachy color. But then we can go to hue, saturation, brightness, and play around with other ideas. I like the purple idea. The blue isn't bad. What if we did like a really dark color? Sometimes gouache looks good with really dark colors. So this is where you get to just play around with color and composition. Because mine is more of a fall theme, I might even go with like a mustardy brown type thing. So take your time here, choose a color that works for your style, and of course, why not create some color versions? So I'm going to press select, duplicate, and then I could change out everything. I could change out all the flowers. So I'm going to do the same thing, and we'll call this one a summer palette. So I just changed out a few of the colors and it has a completely different feel. So this is where I recommend you just take some time to play around with color. There is like the perfect color combination waiting for you somewhere, but you have to find it. And I like to do this by turning on the color fill option to easily switch between colors. So you can tap on a color, like let's say the background, for example, tap select, make sure color fill is on, and then you can just tap through various color versions until you find the one that's perfect for you. So that's a really fast way to flip through color versions. I do have to say it doesn't always work great with the gouache just because it doesn't fill the gouache very well. So you'll have to decide here if you want to change the gouache layer by layer or if you like to do this color fill option. So play with both and see what works for you. But in the end, all I really care about is that I get to see your flowers. So please do share these with me. I want to see your messy florals, and I also want to see your sketch layer. So if you create a beautiful sketch layer, just like the one I did here, I would love to see that. So even if you haven't finished your florals, you can share something like that on Instagram as part of a carousel image, and people would love to see that. Okay, everybody, it is question time. At the end of each of these tutorials, I always answer a question from the comments. So if you have a question for me, go ahead and put it in the comments and I might answer yours in the next video. This question is from Celine K Design, who says, "Thank you, Liz. Your tutorial was very helpful. Is it possible to showcase seamless patterns, which are in clip art sets, in our portfolio at the same time? Thank you for your time." This is a really good question, and it depends a lot on what the goals are for your portfolio. For example, are you pitching to certain licensors who sell clip art? Are you just trying to sell clip art to businesses? So it depends a lot on what your goals are for your work and for your portfolio. That's going to determine specifically what should be in there. I do live critiques of portfolios and conversations with members in my membership. So if you wanted to ask a specific question and share your portfolio with me, share all your goals with me, I would be happy to take a look in that studio critique format. I want to show you a few examples of how you can integrate this same style into your composition. So here's a greeting card I made that's a party or wedding invitation. I created some really simple florals using those gouache brushes, and same sort of detail pattern that we did on the flowers I did for all of the various elements, and then we have this fun little composition. I did the same thing for my 2024 calendar that I sell on Etsy. I have just some really simple detail work on the florals using these same gouache brushes and a few others from my gouache class. So if you want to create some artwork like this along with me, come check out my gouache class. So I hope you all enjoyed creating some modern florals with me. Please share these with me. I want to see your sketches. I want to see your finished projects, and you can tag me on Instagram whenever you share these. If you want to keep drawing with me, you can check out these two videos that pair nicely with this tutorial. The first one is the script video where I teach you how to improve your script. So if you're struggling with hand lettering, go check that one out. And the other one is how to make a pattern from a scallop layout. In that video, you're going to learn how to take those modern florals that you just started drawing and put those into a gorgeous pattern. So come work on those with me.